All right, brothers and sisters of sobriety. My name is Vinny. I'm an alcoholic.
And I'm Sam. I'm an alcoholic.
And this is
Episode 10.
Episode 10 of Tenacious Recovery. You got to be tenacious about your recovery if you want to stay sober. And we are in Egg Harbor, New Jersey today because we are a traveling podcast. And Sam, take it over, buddy.
It is with great pleasure that I introduce my good friend, many know him as Bill K. The Illustrious Bill K. Someone who's played a profound role in my life through recovery and as well as just like personal and professional development. Bill kind of weirdly fell into my lap in a work perspective in about 2018 or 19, I would say. And through that, I can tell you that he's one of my best friends, if not my best friend that I have today. He's got an incredible story. He's got an incredible way with words. And I love hearing him talk about getting sober, recovery, and what that looks like today. So, William, how are you?
I'm good, buddy. Thanks for having me, fellas.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
And nobody calls him William.
Except my
Just-
mom when she's angry.
That's right.
Yeah.
And Sam.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
So the way we typically do this is we would have you start from the beginning, right? Kind of like you would normally speak. Start from the very beginning. Take us all the way back to the beginning of your life and how things manifested.
Sure. Let's do it. Yeah. So my name's Bill, and I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Bill.
Hello, Bill.
Hey, fellas. No, I appreciate you guys having me. So, yeah, I mean, look, I always start out by saying, you know, I had a very, I would say, pretty typical upbringing. You know, middle class suburban neighborhood. You know, family of 3 kids, parents intact at the beginning, anyway. You know, we had everything that everything we needed and most of what we wanted. There wasn't really any history of, you know, trauma or addiction or alcoholism in my family roots as far as I'm aware of. That being said, you know, my parents went 2 for 3 with their kids. You know, my brother's active in recovery at this point as well. But yeah, being the oldest of 3, like, you know, Sam talked about it a little bit ago. My story very much intertwines with my brother and sister. You know, we've always been a very tight unit since, you know, at least early teenage years. But yeah, man, I remember a lot of good times as a kid, a lot of good times with my family, a lot of time spent together. Again, you know, it's funny when you look back at this stuff. Like, I feel like I've done a lot of therapy and a lot of work in AA over the years. And when I look back, you know, I think of all the ways that my parents did better than their parents did with them, right? And, you know, when I'm raising my children, I look forward to doing even a little bit better than they did with me. And I think they did the best that they could, given the information that they had. That's not to say that everybody, you know, bats 1,000 when it comes to parenting, as you well know, buddy.
I can attest to
You
that.
know?
It doesn't come with a rule book, that's for sure. A set of instructions.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, it's funny, like, I look back at certain things where, again, we spent a lot of time together. I did sports as a kid. My parents were there for me with that stuff. But I look back and I notice, like, these moments where I had, like, profound guilt or shame, maybe more so than, you know, your average bear. I don't know. But, like, you know, when I would bring up maybe an interest outside of what was acceptable in my dad's eyes, for instance, you know, he might make a comment and I'd feel embarrassed and things like that. So, like, I look back at little things like that, and those emotions, like, hit me hard back in the day. I remember that, but I don't know. I say that with hindsight being 2020, and not really knowing how to identify that kind of stuff at the time. But, you know, largely speaking, we had a good childhood. So I will say that, you know, like a lot of us, I don't know that I could remember a time feeling like totally comfortable in my own skin. You know what I mean? You know, from the time that I was young enough to really, like, remember these things, I just wanted to fit in. Like, I wanted to be cool. I wanted to be okay. I didn't need to be the coolest guy, the biggest guy, none of that shit. But I did just, like, want to fit in and feel okay. And I don't know that I ever, like, completely did until it was, like, you know, I found drugs and alcohol, man. We talking about drugs and alcohol in this
We're
town?
talking about
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Everything.
from
Yeah.
cover to cover.
Yeah, so I remember again, I played sports as a kid. I played a couple different sports. I was never the best dude on the team, but I did okay, and I was never getting the most girls, but I did okay. You know what I mean? But one thing I kind of instantly felt like I was good at was drugs. I felt like I was where I belonged. I felt a certain degree of social acceptability, which was a big deal for me at the time. And I remember, smoking my first joint at the age of 12 and thinking, this is cool. It's funny because while actually I didn't enjoy the effects that it had on me, I didn't like how I felt. Socially, I did like the acceptance that it brought about.
The status that it brought for you.
Yeah, I just felt like, I'm doing what the other guys
You were in with a new crowd at that point.
Correct.
Yeah. And that felt really good, even though everyone else was saying, I feel so chill and relaxed. To be honest, I felt anxious as hell.
Knowing you, I would imagine you were crawling out of your skin.
I was paranoid when I
Yes.
smoked weed, and I kept smoking it.
It's funny. I don't think I actually was intoxicated the first couple times I smoked weed, and then I remember the first time that it hit me. Oh, brother.
Yeah.
Let me tell you. I was walking on a treadmill all through Philly. It took me, I couldn't get anywhere.
Well, it was insane back in the day, too, because, weed nowadays, it's, so socially acceptable.
It's
but
powerful, too.
Yeah, it's powerful.
Oh,
We
it's
were
totally
smoking,
different
dog shit weed out of a cat in a dry can behind a dumpster and, holding our T-shirts out the window, hoping the cops didn't smell it on us hours later. So that, whatever. That was kind of an average day in my early teenage years, just, smoking weed in the woods. And then, then the alcohol came in the mix. And I'll never forget the first time I drank alcohol. That took my sense of social acceptability, social acceptance to a completely new level. I remember my mom, I was working a job at Perkins at the time.
The restaurant?
The restaurant,
Nice.
Yeah, my very first job. I think I was maybe 14 or so, working as a dishwasher there. And I got invited to a party on a Friday night. My mom dropped me off at the party, and I got shit-faced. And I thought I was, killing it at this party. But I threw up on the wall. I think, people were laughing at me. You know what I mean? And then my mom picked me up later. It was kind of like that scene in Old School where, Will Ferrell gets picked up by his wife, and he's naked. That was pretty much that, except in this scenario, the wife was my mom. And yeah, so that was how my first night of drinking went. But I remember, I loved it. I loved the feeling. I felt every little bit of gap in my confidence filled in by the booze. And I just kind of wanted that sensation all the time after that. And that kind of propelled me forward.
How old were you then?
I was probably 14 then. Yeah. So, I would say I was probably still a fairly casual, maybe heavy user of booze and weed, 14, 15, 16. And then I'll never forget, midway through high school, this drug called Oxycontin came around. And it kind of came out of nowhere. And we had heard, stay away from this stuff. It's bad. But then again, we started seeing that some of our friends were using it and they looked like they were okay. And, I wanted to be around people who drank and got high like I drank and got high. So I found myself in circles of friends where, that type of thing was acceptable. And again, I remember my first time ever experimenting with opiates, somebody cut me off a tiny piece of one of these Oxycontin 80s. And I snorted it. It was probably maybe 10, 15 milligrams, and I instantly threw up. I got sick pretty quickly, but at the same time, I felt very, very good. And to me, it was kind of, it was some of the confidence-inspiring effects that other substances had on me without some of the intoxicating effects of something like alcohol. So I felt like I could feel really good, yet still be in control, if that makes any sense.
I feel like opiates fill in those insecurity holes like alcohol does, but on steroids.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
100%.
To a degree. I remember my mom once asked me, why is everybody getting so hooked on these things? And I looked her dead in the eyes. I said, because it's like kissing God. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It literally makes you feel completely invincible. There's a reason that this has killed off millions and millions of people over the course of even the last 10 years.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
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 Yeah. I think at this point, like a quarter of my graduating class from high school was dead.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's insane. But getting back into it, I just remember feeling incredible. And I've heard it talked about in movies and documentaries. People say it's like, a nice warm blanket wrapped around you. That's exactly what it's like. And I didn't ever want to give up that feeling. So I was pretty quickly off to the races with that one. And that was the stage in my life, like 16, 17, where I went from I do drugs or I drink with groups of other people to no, I just drink and I do drugs and I do this by myself and I'll do anything that I need to do to continue this feeling. And that's what I did. I pretty instantaneously started selling these things to get more of them. And that became my life from 16 to 24.
At like a pretty high level, correct?
Yeah. I mean, every day, like I would say it took me maybe a year or two to get into the swing, like to move into a point where I realized that I was not only physically, but in every way completely dependent on these things. Again, for the first year or two, in my mind, it felt casual and like this is just kind of something I was doing to make a little extra money. And yes, I was doing these things every day. But it wasn't until like maybe a year in, again, maybe age 17, where I was forced to go without. I couldn't find anything. And I realized how physically dependent I had become.
Yeah.
And it was horrendous. And I quickly fixed that. I, found what I need to find. And then, every day of my life, man, from 17 through 24, I went through my entire college experience living, kind of a dual life. On the outside, my life looked very normal. I graduated from high school. I got into a good college, and I commuted down to that college. I went to Drexel University in Philadelphia. I live in the suburbs of Philadelphia. So every day, I'd take the train down, I'd go to my classes, do the bare minimum I had to get by. I'd be high all day. And then I'd come home at night and I'd drive my car down to North Philly and I'd pick up like 100 of these Oxycontin 80s. And then at some point, they were replaced with the Perk 30s. But we get, 100 or 200 of those, offload them that night, take what I needed for myself and then rinse and repeat the next day. And that was every day of my life.
One thing I've always respected about you is that you're extremely ambitious.
Yeah.
You're very, very ambitious and you're very, very smart. And I'm not trying to compare my disease to yours in any capacity, but the fact that you had figured out a way to maintain your own habit through selling, which I had never been able to do. I have been fronted a million bags of this and that and dropped the ball with it every single time, let alone make it to something like a university, is insane.
Well, it doesn't sound like he was selling them for a gigantic profit. It was more to actually use your own stuff.
Correct. Yeah. I just skated by doing, 10 Oxy 80s and then 20 or so Perk 30s every day.
Insane.
For free. And it just felt like, honestly, a practical solution at the time. Because like I had buddies who at that point had moved on to heroin and fentanyl and all this shit and they were robbing houses. But like I watched it and just practically speaking, it would seem like they'd maybe get a good score here and there and then get arrested and then go weeks without. I didn't want to ever go a day, let alone weeks without. So the whole idea of selling felt much more practical in terms of feeding my habit every day.
How bad do you feel about selling that now?
I mean, in hindsight,
you weren't in your right mind,
correct.
Obviously.
And at the time, I thought I was better off, or I thought I was doing better than the people who were breaking into houses, but I was no better. Maybe there's an argument to be made. Those people I sold to, would they have got it regardless? Maybe. But, in hindsight, like that's one of the things that I've looked to make amends for over the past, 10 plus years of my life. But yeah, I mean, in hindsight, like I was contributing to the problem, you know what I mean? Poisoning my own community, which, I don't look back fondly upon whatsoever. So I'll tell you that in that same period of time, I thought at the time that I just had a string of bad luck and I was arrested, I don't know, maybe 9 or 10 times over dumb stuff. Like thankfully, I never got busted with like a huge amount of drugs, but I'd get arrested with a little bit of weed here. I got a DUI charge here. I remember when I was maybe 21 years old, I was able to obviously legally drink for the first time. And this was during one period that I thought I was sober. I put down my drug of choice for maybe a couple weeks. And I got pulled over, and they did a blood test on me, and I had weed and Xanax and cocaine and alcohol in my system, and I had been going around earlier that day telling all my circles like I'm clean and I'm doing good now, and I really believed that. I did. So again, handful of minor arrests, nothing super crazy, nothing that kind of stopped me. I got sent to a couple outpatient programs, and I did that thing that we all do, right? Like, I compared myself. I'd be in these groups, and I'm still living at my dad's house in my early 20s, and I think at that point I was close to finishing school. I'm looking at guys with, covered in tattoos that are talking about jamming needles in their neck. And I'm like, just thinking, you guys are fucked up. Like, you need to be here. Like, this is dumb for me. I'm just here on a technicality.
I'm not like you people.
No, not at all. I didn't identify with it whatsoever. Even though, like, my life was the definition of unmanageability, a week didn't go by without something. If it wasn't an arrest, it was, my dad or my mom, somebody finding something or some sort of crazy drama, chaos, somebody trying to break into my house to take my shit, getting into a fight, just dumb stuff that inevitably, like, I'll tell you what, never happens in my life now.
Definitely.
Never happens in my life now. I can't tell you the last time, like, me and the law or me and another human have had that level of an unfavorable interaction.
Getting pulled over is kind of crazy in today's world, though, because for a second you forget
the
where
feeling
you're at
does
in your
hit
life.
you. Yeah,
Always.
the
Instantly
feeling
tickles
does
me in
hit
the
you.
back of my head. I'm like, oh, I'm going to jail for the rest of my
Always.
life.
Yeah.
And then it's like,
Believe
for
me.
what?
I still feel it after 38
I
years
believe it.
when there's cops behind me. Even if the lights aren't on, I'm like, oh my God, something's going to catch up to me now. After 38 years.
Yeah. It's crazy. And I, just going through life with blinders on, like, I had all this stuff, going good for me in my life, like the college, a good family. And, and my childhood best friend, his name was Steve. And in 2010, he passed away from an overdose. He left treatment, and again, like, I'm using with him at the time. He goes away to treatment, and for whatever reason, I separate myself from him. Even though we're using the same stuff, he goes away to treatment. I think, like, good for him. He needs the help. And he goes away, and he comes back, he runs away, and he basically, went to a park nearby our old neighborhood, and loaded up a syringe with a full bundle of heroin, and intentionally, like, ended his own life.
Intentionally?
Yeah, he left a note and everything. Yeah, no, I mean, it really fucked me up at the time, but it didn't even for 1 second make me think to stop. It didn't. I mean, this was like my closest buddy in the world at the time, and we were doing the same thing, and it didn't connect with me to stop whatsoever. So I just, kept pressing on. And then I'll tell you, man, like, my early 20s were probably the darkest years of my entire life. Every single day, not only was it a rat race, this duality of trying to keep up with the drug dealing and the using, with, trying to have people think that Bill's doing good because he shows up to work every day. Now I got a job.
You got a job right out of college?
I mean, I was always working. Like, I always had a job.
But like an office job?
What did I have? I did. Right after college, I did have an office job. My dad got me a job at the company that he was working for. So he worked for a company that basically manufactured, metal car parts for police and municipal vehicles. And he oversaw their production facility and got me a job in the front office. And I was there for about 3 months. And it was funny, like, I identify a lot with what's in the book of AA because it talks about this stuff, like, in detail. But in some ways, like, I was a model employee. I'd show up on time, and I wanted to do well, and when I want to get my shit together, I can. But then I can't make it through a day, like literally a day, without nodding out inside of a meeting in front of the president of the company, and I'm getting emails sent around about me. I remember at a separate job, I was overlooking on somebody's computer over their shoulder when they were explaining something to me, and I saw they had emailed a picture of me nodding out in my office chair to the rest of the office, like making fun of me. You know what I mean? It was the worst, dude. It killed me.
No.
You know me.
That
dude.
happened to you? I've never heard that story before.
Yeah. I worked for like 10 days at a recruiting company.
Oh, you didn't show up the next day?
No, I was fired the same day.
Okay.
Yeah. They and it was funny because even then, like these situations would pop up, and I'm a full blown junkie at this point. I'm nodding out in my seat. I have no good explanation for it. And I remember they brought me into the office and they said like, "Hey, Bill, what's going on here?" And I had the nerve with like a straight face to say, "If only." I think if I had some more training, I'd be all right.
Yeah.
And they were like, I don't think it's a training problem, bud. Pack up your shit and get the fuck out of here.
And then, and your dad worked there?
That small story I just told, that was actually at a different company.
Okay.
But we'll come
But I was
back
going to say that would be really embarrassing.
I embarrassed
For
my
him,
dad.
that is,
No, I embarrassed him. Don't you worry. So,
Yeah.
so after a couple months, I'm speeding up to 24 here, and again, like I just think it's worth mentioning that today, Sam would tell you I'm a pretty happy, outgoing, fun-loving guy. I'm a very grateful guy. I enjoy my life, man. If I didn't, I wouldn't be here. I'd probably just still be out there. If life and sobriety and life and recovery sucked, I wouldn't be here. But I'm having a good fucking time. That period in my life, I didn't think for a second that was even possible. If you told me that somebody lived, sober, completely drink and drug free, I didn't believe it. I genuinely didn't think it was possible. I didn't know what the fuck it would even look like. What would I do for work? Who would I be as a human being? What am I even into besides like drugs and alcohol? Because I hadn't accumulated any new interests, in my early 20s while being an active junkie either. I didn't know who the hell I was. And I'll tell you, man, like multiple, dozens and dozens of times I tried to get clean, substitute one thing for another, detox myself. Whatever. I'm only going to drink. I'm only going to smoke weed. Only take these pills, not that. None of it ever worked. And time again, I found myself like on the floor of my basement, like just going through full on withdrawals, crying, just wanting my life to end. Multiple days, like wanting to kill myself and, just not having the courage to do it, really. But still, like, just like the AA book talks about, like, I'm at that point where I can't go on with, I can't go on without. Like, I don't know what to do. And I'm just stuck, waiting for something to change. So, May 24th of 2012, I'm working at that job with my dad. And this, knock on wood, is the last day that I ever had an encounter with the law, but I had a big one this day. There was a guy in my neighborhood who, if I couldn't, grab what I needed down in the city, there was a guy who occasionally would have like a full prescription for me to pick up. I call him. He agrees to meet me down in Southampton, Pennsylvania, in a shopping center. And I'll never forget. It was a nice night out. It was like 7 o'clock. So it was like right around dusk. And I go down to meet this guy. I get into his car. He gives me like 100 pills, and I give him a couple $1,000. I get back in my car, and I had somebody else with me at the time who I was going to offload like half these to right away. And I start trying to bust a couple of these things up on my lap because I'm getting ready to sniff them, and they won't crush. They're like rock solid. I don't really think much of it. I keep driving about 20 yards. I get to the end of a row of cars in this parking lot, and I hear screeching tires out my right window. So I look over to my right, and I see two big-ass unmarked SUVs just hauling ass on 3 wheels around the corner. They cut us off, and then all of a sudden, all these normal cars, like, a Saturn, like a Prius, like normal.
It's always a Nissan Sentra.
Yeah, dude, like crazy.
It's always
like,
a Nissan Sentra when you get jumped out on.
Right,
yeah.
It was crazy. So we get completely surrounded by Bucks County detectives and these opioid task force guys with assault rifles pointed at my head. And I'll never forget it. Like, I just heard him say, clear as day, put your hands over your head or I'm going to blow your fucking head off. And, I'll preface by saying that 1 second prior, I thought I was like your classic suburban gangster selling drugs.
Yep.
Fearless, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Tough as nails.
Tough as nails.
Yeah.
I realized.
Horsham's finest.
I realized what a soft pussy I was in that moment, dude. Oh my God, I've never been more scared in my life. But I'll tell you what, like in a 5-second span, my fear instantly turned to relief because I thought like, all right, there's no escaping this one. I was already on probation, so like I knew I was double, if not triple fucked. And I just knew that like maybe this is a shot for this all to be over. I didn't know what that was going to look like, but I was tired, man. I was tired of living this way. whatever. So getting back to embarrassing my dad, like they take me off to, the holding cell, then they take me off to the county jail. I don't show up at work the next day. My dad doesn't know where the hell I am, so he's traveling all over town for a day or two, not knowing where his son is. He never came home. And I'll never forget, man, after getting processed and all that shit, I was maybe...
Well, they were on to you, right? They knew exactly who you were. They knew what you were doing.
So
did your neighbor set you up?
It was the guy, it was the guy in my neighborhood who, what his deal was, he had gotten busted writing fake prescriptions, and to get a lesser sentence, I suppose, he was turning in people who were buying off of him.
Right.
So apparently 2 hours earlier, they had set up another kid that I knew in the same parking lot, and so he was just kind of...
In the same parking lot?
Yeah.
It was a sting.
It was a sting, yeah. So I'll get to that in 1 second. So, 48 hours into my jail stay, I call my dad, and he asked me this question. He's like, and it was a great question. He was like, Bill, my God. He's like, he goes, you're not a total fucking moron, but you act like one all the time. Why is it? He said, why is it that you have all this light all around you all the time, yet repeatedly you choose to gravitate towards the dark shit? And I didn't have a good answer for him. Like I always said, that was probably the first honest breath I breathed to my dad. And, quite some time I just said, like, Dad, I don't know. It's a good question. I don't know. I didn't understand this thing of addiction or alcoholism. I really didn't. I had no clue what it was that I was up against, and I didn't have a good answer to his question. So he signs off by saying, like, congratulations, you're fucking unemployable at this point. Good luck to you, and hangs up the phone. And on that, I go back to my cell, and fast forward a couple months, that same dad, again, I thought I was a Lone Ranger, but Daddy came through for me.
Daddy showed up.
Daddy showed up. I got a good lawyer for me. And I remember the day that the lawyer came to the jail, I was relieved because I thought, like, maybe this is going to be some forward momentum. I was even more scared once I heard what this guy said, because he sits down across from me in the little, room that they have there, and he takes a deep breath, and he goes, Bill, this is a big fucking mess. And I was like, oh no, because I thought he was going to tell me something like, whatever, like, we're going to throw this out, we got it handled, some cool, like,
the judge owes me a favor.
Yeah, I thought it was going to be like some cool, like, mob type shit that he was going to be like, yeah, don't even worry about it, Bill, like, we're good. No, he was like, this is really fucked up. He said, they've got you 9 ways from Sunday. They've been listening to your phone recordings for the last couple months.
Wow.
They've been tailing you and your brother, who was in on this whole deal, for the last couple months, and they're going to serve a warrant for your brother tomorrow morning. And the first thing I said was, like, I'll do anything if you can. Like, I'm thinking of my brother and I'm thinking of my dad. Again, we have a tight-knit family. I'm trying to spare my brother and spare my dad, and I'm already in the situation, so I'm like, I'll do anything. I'll stay in here longer, whatever you want. If you can just, like, I don't know what this request was going to do.
Scrap my brother.
Yeah, just leave my brother out of it.
Leave him out of
Right.
it. I don't want my dad to have to suffer through 2 of his kids going through this shit. There wasn't any doing in that. So they ended up...
They wouldn't go for that?
No.
He looked
I didn't think so.
And said no.
I didn't think so.
Yeah. He looked at me and nodded and said no. So kind of moving through this. A couple more months go by. They pick up my brother. He gets arraigned on the same charges, except each one of his were like conspiracy to commit the same charges that I had. So mine was a felony possession with intent to deliver, criminal use of a communications facility, and there was some other one in there. And he had conspiracy to all these things. They were a little bit lesser, and he hadn't had as lengthy of a sheet, before this moment as I had. So they end up sending him to some sort of camp in the woods for, younger guys, a chance to, kind of undo everything. And my thing keeps going through. I'm in there for a few more months, and I go through this assessment in the jail with a guy who is their drug and alcohol counselor. And this was the first moment it hit me that I had a drug problem. Oddly enough, he runs me through these questions, and I'm answering yes to every single one. Like, can you stop? Or, do you use even when you don't want to use? And has it caused you pain? Has it caused your family pain? All this stuff. And I'm yes. And I'm looking at the sheet and I'm like, all right, maybe I do qualify for some form of treatment. So what happens is they run that through their whole system, whatever. I get into this pre-trial intervention program, and a few months later, I get out of the jail, and same day report down to an inpatient treatment facility for the
How
first time.
long were you incarcerated for?
It was like 3 or 4 months.
3 or 4 months.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so it felt like a lifetime in there because
sure.
time moves slow, brother.
And where were you, county?
Yeah, Bucks County.
Bucks County?
Yeah, so from what I hear, one of the preferable jail stays if you had to do one, but if you're not built for it, which, like, admittedly, these days I'll tell you I'm not, it's just, like, not where you want to be.
Right.
So anyway, I get out of there. I go straight down to, a treatment facility in Bensalem, Pennsylvania. And unlike everybody else who was there, I was so thankful and so grateful to be there. I was like, maybe 4 months sober the first day I got in there, which in hindsight, working in the field, I don't even know how that worked. But, nonetheless, we went in. And I was like completely willing, man. Like, whatever you want me to do, tell me what to do, because I didn't know how to live. I really didn't. I was willing to give it all up. I thought on that day, best case scenario, I won't get arrested anymore and I won't embarrass my family anymore. I was like pretty certain that life was going to suck and be super boring. But I was like willing to make that trade-off if I just didn't like keep living in that guilt and shame and embarrassment and constant trouble and just wanting to die every day. Like, I was willing to make the trade-off of not wanting to die for a boring life. I would have been happy with that. So they told me, all the typical shit, dude. They said 90 and 90. They told me get a sponsor, get a home group, get a commitment, all that stuff. And, like, truth be told, I did like 85 meetings in 90 days, and I did the rest of the shit they told me to do. And, like, pretty quickly, like, life turned around. I would say my family relationships started to mend over a few months. And I'll tell you, like, when I graduated, when I left treatment, I had like negative $1,000 in my bank account. I didn't have a cell phone. I was a year away from getting my license back. I didn't have a dollar to my name, no employment. I had a new felony on my record. No girlfriend, no friends, no nothing. Within 6 months, like, besides the driver's license, like, all that stuff was back.
Did you have a new job?
I did. Yeah, I just worked waiting tables at a country club, which was like great for me at the beginning.
Job. I love
it. Was the best, dude. Like, that first year of recovery was the fucking best because thankfully, and I don't even like know exactly what series of events transpired to allow a man in his mid-20s at that point to just basically do nothing except focus on his recovery. That's what I did. Like, it felt like my adult, like, summer break from school in some ways when I look back at it.
There's nothing like early sobriety. I was actually just on the phone with a gentleman right before we came in here out there who's got about 11 years of continuous sobriety. And like I've shared, I've been going through things in life, as any man does lately. And I'm sitting here on the phone with him, and I said, do you remember how connected to God or a higher power of your understanding you felt in your first year of recovery, and how you just lived in tandem with that and how freeing it was? Granted, like, you didn't have all the responsibilities that you have now, but if you can just channel that feeling, like that feeling of acceptance, that whatever's going to happen is going to be okay as long as I don't drink, and that freedom, it is priceless. And unfortunately, I think that recovery develops, sobriety develop, we as men develop over time. I think we'll never be able to get back to that simple of a life just because the gifts have given us more things.
Yeah.
But there is a way we can get in touch with that guy,
100%.
In today's world. It takes a little bit of work, but it is still available, like that freedom. Just hearing you talk about it, I remember I worked at a coffee shop in early sobriety. It was the best job I ever had in my life. The people at the coffee shop hated me. They could not stand me. Like, I did not fit in well with the coffee shop. I loved that job so much. I don't even think I'd be here today if I didn't have it.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah.
Wow. It's crazy. Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No,
It's
it's
just
cool.
like when I hear people talk about that first year, like, it just gets me fired up.
I completely relate. And, like, in some ways the stakes are so high, and in some ways the stakes are low. Like, to your point, they're high because it's kind of like very much life and death, especially at that point in my experience. And at the same time, low. Like, I didn't have all the gifts yet. So all I had to do was stay sober, which, again, for somebody new, it doesn't feel like all I have to do is, like, an appropriate preface for that statement because it's a big deal and it's difficult. But, you know, I made some friends early on. I got that job. I went to meetings. People started to know my name. It was so goofy in the beginning. I felt so uncomfortable, man. Like, I hadn't lived a sober breath for the last 10, 12 years in my life, and I'm now 25 years old, and they want me to get my hand up in a new room full of strangers like, hi, I'm Bill, and these are my feelings. You know, like, I felt ridiculous the first time doing it. But quickly, like, that feeling ridiculous led to feeling accepted, which led to fellowship, which led to feeling some sense of connection with other people in the rooms before I had any sense of connection with God or myself even. And yeah, I mean, that's kind of how it went for a couple years. I went to a lot of meetings. I met some good people. I did a lot of fellowshipping. I didn't do any step work. I didn't really consciously work to develop a relationship with God, and I certainly didn't do anything to my recollection to give back to others. And what happened was, you know, kind of what you might expect to come next. I relapsed after 3 years. Now, interesting, I was out for 9 months maybe in 2016 and 2015 and 16. And I remember, so it's funny, like I mentioned a couple times, I'm very close with my younger brother. I'm 36. My brother Matt, he's 32. And when I first got sober, man, like, I didn't have any hopes in the world that this kid was going to get sober. Growing up, like, you know, people would always say, like, I spoke for the two of us. He kind of always walked in my shadow. He just kind of like would walk around staring at the ground and maybe utter a sentence or two, but he didn't seem like the brightest bulb in the box. Now, I say that now because I'm about to compliment him. This guy saved my life. My younger brother saved my life in 2016 because what happened was he did not get sober when I first did. That camp did not work for him. He ended up in 2015 in a similar situation where his probation officer caught up with him and, you know, sent him off to the jail, and then he went to a recovery house. And in that recovery house, you know, a man introduced him to the 12 steps of AA. And I didn't really see my brother Matt for a little bit. Like, that whole time I was out, I didn't talk to him too much. I didn't see him much, but I remember this day, July 28th, it was in 2016. I knew I was at my wit's end again. I hadn't had any legal trouble, but I was just broken down once again, ready to kill myself or give this another go. And at the time, I felt resentful towards the whole recovery process because I felt like I had given it an honest go and it hadn't worked for me. That's how I felt at the moment. So, like, I'm calling him ready to curse out AA, NA, all the A's, all the recovery shit. And I call him, and it was so bizarre. Like, there's an experience in the book that they talk about something similar where I obviously recognized my brother's voice, but that was kind of where the resemblance ended at that point. The man that I spoke to that day was infinitely, you know, more free and wise and articulate and just happy and mature than he ever had sounded in his life. And there was something, again, we're just on the phone, and there was something clearly different in this guy. And I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? And he's talking to me about God and about service to others and carrying himself with humility and this 12-step work. And I'm like, you know, I'm a pretty practical guy, and I'm like thinking of all these things I did before. Like, I went to meetings, I got a sponsor, I bitched that sponsor all the time. You know, I complained about my problems to him daily, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like doing a little checklist in my head, and the 4 things that he had rattled off were nowhere in my program. So I thought, like, all right, maybe I left a few stones unturned. And reluctantly, I agreed to go to my first ever solution-based AA meeting with him that night. And, you know, I sat down with the same sponsor that took him through the steps, and I'll never forget it, man. I sat down with this guy, and he, I started complaining to him right off the rip because I thought sponsors were supposed to be a free therapist. You know what I mean? And I'm like, yo, if you believe it, the job fired me for getting high. My girlfriend left me because I was lying to her about getting high, and then she found out I was getting high. And, and then and he stops me and he goes, Bill, do me a favor. Shut the fuck up. And I was appalled. I looked at him. I was like, what, dude? I was like, aren't you supposed to love me until I love myself?
Right.
And he was like, fuck no. He's like, you've been loving yourself just fine.
Yeah.
And look where that's got you. And I'm like, God damn it. I was so pissed, but I couldn't fight him. And he looked like he was happy. So I knew like he was doing something different than I was doing. And then he said, listen, I'm being a jerk off, but I'm doing so intentionally. You're going to see pretty soon that it's not all about you anymore. And I couldn't even fathom what exactly that meant, but I was like, all right. And he was like, we're going to go through the steps. We're going to go through the first 3 tonight, and then we're going to get you on the 4th step. And I was like, whoa, easy does it, right? I saw that on a wall one time. Easy does it. And he was like, I'm glad you said that, Bill. He's like, let me ask you a question. How do you feel right now? And I said, I'll tell you right now. If I don't find something to make me feel better, like right now, I'm either going to kill myself or I'm going to go get high. He's like, perfect. Do you want to feel better soon, or do you want to easy does it and take your time? And I was like, he got me again.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He had me again. And I'm like, this motherfucker. So we sit down and we start going through the steps. And, look, man, I didn't have like a white light experience, any singular moment. But what I did have was, I remember writing that 4th step and then sharing it with him and with God on the 5th step. And to be honest, like, I don't know that was the moment. Like, there was something there. But I remember after like doing a couple of amends, like that's where it started to hit me. I remember when I came in, like, Sam will tell you, like, I can be an anxious guy, and like the first 6 months, my head is going a million miles a minute. A lot of us have, come in here with relationship drama, and all I could think about in the beginning was like the girl who left me, you know what I mean? And, I remember it consumed my thoughts all day, every day. What's she doing? Who's she with? Blah, 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 all this stuff. I want to get her back. And I remember like maybe 4 months into this process, I had done a couple amends, and I'm driving down the road, and it was like 10 o'clock at night. I'm on Route 309. I'm by myself. There's no music on. And it just struck me that like my head was quiet for the first time in as long as I can remember, possibly ever. And I just felt okay. I felt okay with the girl, without the girl. I felt okay. And I started like tearing up a little bit because like I felt like it was working. You know what I mean? Like this promise that they had made to me, if I did what they told me to do, like actually did some work on myself, it was actually starting to come true. And that was when like I really got fired up for AA. And I started being one of those guys you see in the meeting, like trying to sponsor everybody and all this stuff. And, the next couple years of my life, like things really just took off. And
big time.
Yeah, I'll pause after saying this, that like, sometimes like this whole deal has worked so well that I like forget that that's what brought me to the dance. You know what I mean? And I've had multiple periods in the last 8 years where I've forgotten that. You know what I mean? I dive into this work and I'm helping a bunch of guys, and it's great. And I don't consciously think it in my head, like, but what my feet say sometimes is like, fuck hey, like I'm good. You know what I mean? Like, again, I don't consciously think that, but like before I know it, all I'm doing is work or the relationship or whatever else, and I'm neglecting the thing that got me to the dance, and then I don't think of it until,
It's so apparent.
It's so apparent. Everybody around me starts to notice it. You can read my emotions a mile away. I haven't had any physical relapses in the last 8 years, but I've had like a couple, spiritual ones for sure.
Yeah, when other people start telling you, isn't there a meeting tonight?
Yeah.
Like you need to take their advice that, well, something's going on, I guess.
Yeah.
I got so-and-so telling me to go to a meeting, and that's a good thing. But going back to that, driving down the road on 309, you feeling okay. That was probably the best thing that you felt in like years and years, because all of a sudden you weren't thinking 18 steps ahead, thinking about your past. You were just in the moment, no radio, no nothing. You were okay.
Yes.
Right? I mean, what a great feeling. Just being okay.
It's acceptance,
Heavenly.
man. It's when you can reach acceptance, like true acceptance. Page 4, not to thump the book, but like they talk about page 417, acceptance was the answer. If you can reach a point in time where you are absolutely content with the outcome of any situation and really, really are content with the fact that it is out of your control and that you're going to be okay, there's nothing better than that. And it's so hard to attain that. Sometimes we have to work towards it on an hourly basis, let alone a daily basis. You know what I mean? Because life's coming at you from all directions all the time.
Sometimes it's actually a minute by minute.
And to
kind
me,
of a thing.
Absolutely. And for me, the best possible thing is that I get dealt a bad hand that is outside of my control, and I don't point fingers at anyone, including myself, and I just try to figure out what the best possible route to take is to mainly service others in those situations and be completely content with the way things shake out. And getting there, it's not easy. As you know what I've been going through. You've seen what I've gone through over the years. It is not always easy. It's almost impossible to get there. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes it takes me weeks. Sometimes it takes me minutes.
I think we all get there. I don't know anybody who stayed there.
You can't stay there.
Yeah.
If I could stay there, I wouldn't need to keep doing this.
Yeah,
thing,
right.
You know?
Yeah.
So one thing I love about you, and a lot of people in our field know about you, is work. Can you slightly kind of touch on the next professional phase of your life at this point?
It was interesting when I first got sober. I told you I took that job at a country club, and after that I got my first job in a professional type of setting that I went to school for in marketing. I was making next to minimum wage, but I was so thankful just to have an opportunity to work somewhere that, actually was in my field, and they had looked past this felony on my record. And I will say this to anybody who might be struggling with this, like, it was a big concern for me having this, duality of a college degree and, multiple felonies on my record. I didn't think I was ever going to amount to anything. I really didn't think that was going to be possible. Turns out, 10 years later, and the benefit of hindsight, none of that really mattered. I think, showing up every day and doing the right thing, everything unfolded exactly the way it feels like it should have. Now, that first job I took, I ended up hating that job.
And what field were you in?
I was at a marketing agency.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, in just general marketing for any company that came through the door. And I worked my butt off, and I learned as much as I could. And then ultimately, about a year later, I got an offer from a different marketing agency and a little bit more money. And then same thing happened about a year after that, a little bit more money. Now, that actually brought me up to the point of the relapse that I had mentioned. After my experience in going through the steps and AA, I had a big reset, and I was really, really fortunate. I'll never forget it. My roommate at the time, I'm about maybe 9 months sober, and he comes to me and he tells me that there's a treatment center opening up in our neck of the woods, and they have a call center, and they're looking for call center reps for this, this company. And it had always been in my mind that one of the things I didn't like about work previously is that I just didn't give a flying fuck about anything I was doing. I didn't have any passion, any personal tie to it, and I thought that would be nice to work in something that I actually care about. And for me, I'm a pretty simple guy. I mean, I love recovery, I love comedy, and I love music. And there were no comedians nor record labels busting down my door. So, like,
Right.
this felt like, all right. So I remember I was very purposeful in my approach. I put my suit on, I got my resume together, and I went in there to the call center job fair that day. And I told them, like, I don't want a job in your call center. I want a job on your marketing team. And, the guy kind of looked at me a little bit half-cocked, but he walked me over to somebody in the marketing department. I had a series of good interviews that day, and I think I came back for one more on a different day, and ultimately I got the job. The job was a marketing manager position. It was pretty, like, bottom of the totem pole in the department. But I started that job, and I instantly loved it. I'll tell you why. Because, number one, there was a bunch of people in recovery at this place. And I felt like, even though I didn't know anybody, there was a certain sense of connection to the people around me, because while I think you can find, people who are crazy and fucked up in any company, they were my brand of crazy and fucked up. And I felt like an instant almost kinship and connection with those people right out of the gate. Second, as a second point, I found that actually being passionate about what I do and the subject matter at hand, it made me want to work harder, and it made me that much better at what I was doing. So I'd come in every day, and I would do basically my core job responsibilities and get them done in like 4 hours a day. Then I'd circulate around the office, introducing myself to different people in different departments and just saying, hey, I'm Bill K. This is what I do here. What's your name? What do you do? And can I help you with anything? And, occasionally people took me up on that. And I'll always remember there was this one hallway in the office building where I knew the big guys sat. Like I knew the money team was here because these guys were always meeting with the CEO of the company. And I asked them on one Friday, it was like Friday at 3:00. Most people had left. These guys were still there. And I said, what are you guys working on? And they said, we're working on a speech that we want the CEO to deliver to Congress in a couple weeks. And we're really having a hard time with it. And, I won't pat myself on the back often, but I'm a pretty decent writer. And
Outstanding.
I said, I think I can help you with that. And they looked at me like, are you serious? I was like, yeah, give me 20 minutes. And I brought it back to my desk. I put together something that I'm still pretty proud of to this day. And I gave it back to them. And they were blown away with it. And they shared it with the CEO. And, long story short, like 6 months into my time at this company, the CEO calls me into his office and asked me to do something for him. I think it was set up a meeting with a few people, whatever. And he ended up taking a liking to me. And I worked the next 2 years directly under the CEO of that company. And I'll tell you what, it was tough. It was grueling. It was long hours. And there's been many times in my professional career where I've long had to work in the role that I was seeking before I got paid or was called or titled the role that I wanted, right? And this was definitely one of those cases. But I worked with this man for 2 years, and I learned more in those 2 years, professionally speaking, a lot of what to do and, a few things, maybe what not to do. But I learned more in those 2 years than I would say, I did during my 5 years at Drexel 5 times over. And by the time I was kind of done in that role, I felt very well equipped. And one thing that role did for me was it expanded my mindset on what I was capable of achieving and delivering on. Previously speaking, I always kind of looked at companies and I'd see the guys that were the next level up from me. And I'd think oh, that's where all the smart guys are in that room. You know what I mean? That's where these guys are that have these skills or this knowledge that's unattainable to me. And then, I'd find myself in these rooms and I'd not only would, hang in there, but I would thrive oftentimes in these environments. And it did a lot for me professionally that carried over into my own personal sense of confidence and self-worth. And it just showed me what I could do if I worked hard and had, even a shred of belief in myself. And I can't explain really the full degree to which my time at that company was a transformative time in my life. I ended up working there for about 6 years. At one point, probably the latter half roughly of the time that I was there, I spent a lot of time with, Sam here. That was where we first met. And I was put into a leadership role with a lot of, the guys that we know in the field today. And I kind of figured out along the way, again, I try to observe and I try to look and I try to listen. And I see a lot of people doing some things that I want to emulate. And then I see some people doing some things that I don't want to emulate at all. So out of that, I really kind of feel like I found my personal and professional identity through this notion of really exactly back to what AA taught me, helping others. Some people call servant leadership, but really where can I help my team? And through that very simple mindset that often involves a lot of work and a lot of hours and a lot of, crazy scenarios, I found myself really feeling like I was a valuable contributor to this organization, and they seemed to feel the same way. So, over those 6 years, I was fortunate enough to experience a number of promotions and a wide variety of different experiences in sales, leadership, marketing, operations, all these things, to the point where, I left that company with a couple hundred new professional contacts, a couple hundred new people that I think if you ask them would tell you that they had favorable experiences with Bill, and me leaving feeling like a completely changed human being from the time I came in, questioning myself, not knowing my sense of self-worth, not really thinking too highly of myself whatsoever. And I'm still, pretty reluctant to get on my high horse. But that being said, I feel like today, in a professional and a personal setting, I have some real grounded experience in life, knowing the value that I offer and I can deliver, and my own sense of self-worth. So it was nothing short of transformative.
That's awesome.
I love being able to talk about this because I witnessed it. I was there with you at that company through the span of that time. And like when Bill came in, can I share something?
Sure.
Everyone thought he looked like
Okay.
another guy that worked there named Dave. So people were like, oh, it's other Dave. And no one really knew him. He just kind of smiled and laughed it off. I learned later he hated that.
I hated
He
it so
hated
much.
every second of that.
Yeah.
But to look at an entry-level guy who likes to talk about the fact that he grew up a little insecure, possesses insecurities, like most alcoholics, right? Like that's one of our defects. Become this commanding presence of good to the degree that as working at that company, I would tell you that he ran that entire company and it had 3,000 employees.
How about that?
Like
Wow.
to watch him start from this entry-level position to be given little opportunities and to take advantage of them over the course of the 6 or so years was one of the most astounding things I've ever witnessed. And today he stands before us as this like confident man with immense skill sets and immense experiences to share. And he helps people.
That's
He helps
awesome.
people. He helps that same insecure other Dave that walked in the office that day. Like he lends his hand out to that guy and gives him the opportunity that he kind of took advantage of throughout that time. And it is an absolute blessing to witness. It's incredible. I'm just so grateful.
That's awesome.
I really am.
Let me ask you this, like, I know we're going to wrap up pretty soon, but go back to when your dad talked to you when you were in lockup and look at how he looks at you now. What give me the difference there. Like,
You're gonna make me cry, buddy.
no, just I always like to, because you talked about the disappointment in your dad.
Yeah,
Now, is it the polar opposite now?
it is. Yeah, it's crazy, man. I was just texting my dad before you guys walked in. We have a great relationship today. My dad's one of my closest friends, and yeah, I mean, it's been funny to watch. Not funny. It's been nice to watch how the recovery process with both my brother and myself have kind of softened him up a lot too. You know, when one of us gets better, the family tends to recover too, right? And that's very much happened in our case. And yeah, I mean, my dad, I would say, if he were on here, he would probably tell you he's endlessly proud of both my brother and I, as well as my sister. She deserves attention too, even though she's not, a screw up in life. But yeah, man, the contrast is night and day. And I know that there have been a couple times where my dad's not an emotional guy, but I've seen him. I can see when something really hits him, and when he sees, his son doing all these different things in his professional life and his personal life. There's been a lot of milestones on both sides of that fence that he's shared with me and enjoyed with me, and I know how much it means to him. I mean, I talk about my brother a lot, and in some ways, like, I have a 5-year-old adopted daughter these days, but I also have, my younger brother, and prior to my daughter, like, my brother was probably the closest thing I've known to what it might feel like to be a dad, because I love that kid with all of my fucking heart. I would take a bullet for him happily on any day. If there's one person I want to always make sure in life is okay, it's him. And there have been moments in the last 8 years or so where at times it didn't look like I was going to be okay, and at times it definitely didn't look like he was going to be okay. And this almost like what feels like a paternal brand of protective instinct kicks in. But similarly, like when I see him, and he's a union guy as well now, similarly when I see him succeed, it fills me with this indescribable sense of joy and pride and genuinely just being happy for him. So I imagine that's probably maybe a shred of the flavor that my dad feels when he sees these things happen.
That's awesome. That's outstanding. That's coming full circle.
Yeah.
From going from one thing to what you are now. It's awesome to watch. But what a great story.
Incredible.
Great story. I loved it. I'm glad. I'm really happy you agreed to do this. Do you have any parting words for maybe the newcomer or Anything you want to say that you haven't said in the past hour.
Sure, man. I would just say, like, to anybody new, man, give it a shot. I mean, there's a lot of us that come in, myself included, with a lot of I knows, I know. I would just tell you bluntly, if I were sitting in front of you, like, maybe you don't fucking know. If you knew so well, like, you wouldn't maybe be in this position, but that's not okay. It's nothing to be ashamed of. It's just to say, like, for me, I outsourced a lot of my thinking to others that I knew had my best interest at heart in the very beginning, until I had the capacity to kind of make some decisions on my own. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say that while I started in this, and my whole idea, my best hope for myself was maybe I won't be in any more jails or rehabs, and maybe I won't be a total loser. Like, that was the extent of what I thought might be possible in life. And 10 years and some change later from that last time I was in treatment, I've experienced like a whole world of travel and friendships and relationships and heartbreak and success. I would say, like, physical possession gains and some physical possession losses, and family building, and all of these things that have been these indescribably wonderful and sometimes challenging experiences, but they've colored my life infinitely more beautifully than I could have possibly imagined. And just to, I've spoken a lot about the work piece, but I will say that, as a guy who always struggled in relationships, always struggled with a sense of self-worth, I've gained a sense of self-worth. Even though I probably had 1,000 at-bats in the relationship game, I finally have settled in to a relationship in the last couple years that I truly feel, and hope and intend to last the duration of my natural life. With a woman who brought a child to the table, and my relationship with that child has taught me more about life in the last, couple years than I even thought possible, man. And, there's constantly new things that life is showing me. I have some great friends around me. Sam said it earlier, Sam is one of my closest friends, if not my best friend. And, I learned things from watching, Sam go through successes and failures in his own family with his own life, and take some of those from my own. And I know that he does the same with me. And, this whole ride of life has been infinitely more fun, happy, and joyous and free, not to be cliche, but that's exactly what it has been. And it's not always easy, but I will tell you that it's certainly a ride worth being on. I always say, like, if I wasn't having a really good fucking time, I wouldn't be here. It doesn't have to just be sober, period. My life is sober, and I'm having a great fucking time, and I'm having some success at work, and I'm going to fail at work, and I'm going to have some more heartbreak, but I'm going to make some new friends, and I'm going to have some new experiences, and I'm going to learn some new things, and I'm going to get to help some more people. And I don't know, man, I just feel like, especially for addicts and alcoholics, I think most of us have, a higher than average level of intellectual and emotional intelligence, not to mention like grit and ambition and determination. I think especially for, guys and gals like us, like, I do think the sky's the limit on what this life can look like if you just open yourself up to it, and, do what's being taught to us.
Sounds like a lot of gratitude.
Well said, brother.
It is a lot of gratitude, dude. I feel like the most blessed guy on the planet.
Thank you so much for coming to visit us, man.
We definitely appreciate it. It's a great episode. My name is Vinny. I'm an alcoholic and an addict.
And I'm Sam, alcoholic and an addict.
And I'm Bill, an alcoholic and an addict.
My man. And this is Tenacious Recovery. You got to be tenacious about your recovery if you want to stay sober. And we appreciate Bill K. And God willing, we'll see you soon.